Okay, so yesterday we have seen the servlet config thing, right? So servlet config will work only with a particular tool, something called particular servlet will be having a separate servlet configs, right? But servlet context is something. This context is complete to the complete application. So whatever servlet or whatever JS piece or any entity you define, right? You can use this servlet context to config XML thing, right? So that is what we have seen. So we have created a separate context param, right? Where in this context param we have mentioned different param name and param value, right? So in this way you can give. Let's go back here. Now we were about to access this context parameters, right, from our application, which is servlet 1. So we'll be creating into one more servlet where we will see how to access that same in some other servlet, right? So here, so let us take first let us take servlet context, right? You can see you have something called context here, servlet context, right? Which is this is again an object which is being created by your web container, right? So whenever you deploy a project and start the server, right? So automatically all the Java products, so these containers will be registered with the deployed var, right? And whenever it starts, this object will be created. And if at that time if object is not created, at least whenever you are getting the first request after starting the server, right? At least at that time, all the web content, all these type of contexts will be started by a web container. Okay. So let me take it as LOBJ context CNTX is equal to. So again, you have a direct method called get servlet context, right? So this servlet context is the generic servlet context, which will give the current servlet context of the complete application, right? So now from here it's same as what you have seen yesterday, right? So we have seen something called how to access that, right? How to access is, let's say I'm trying to get one element, which is, let us say, string. So what we have defined DB instance. Let us say string DB is equal to LOBJ context and get init param. Right? The internal method is same, but the only thing is the context of usage is different. We have something like this. So with this you will get something called how actually you are actually getting the parameter you have defined context param. And let's print this out. Let's take response dot set content type with text or HTML, and let's take print rated out maybe is equal to, we have a response dot get rated, and let us just write it as simple dot print we say my DB instance name something called as DB, okay. And close the printed. Now these are we get the servlet context details, right? We'll see how to get multiple servlet contexts. As of now, let's go to page 1 and let us just change this to context servlet 1. So that we want to, when I will click on go in my page 1, I want to go to this servlet context. Right? Now here, let's go back here and start the server. Let me just rebuild the project and start my server. You can see it is completely synchronized. Let's open my browser and just say page 1.html. Okay, you have this code. Now, so when you click on go here, so I'm giving my action of this one as servlet context one, context servlet one, this one. Right? So whenever it comes over here, it will directly trigger a do bit. Why? Because we are not giving any method as such. If you give any method, it will go to that method, right? So it will come to the default method we have. Let's click on go. Right? You can see my DB instance name is so and so. Right? So this part is same as servlet config which you have seen. Now the next thing which is exciting over here is the same DB context will be again used in second servlet. Now let us create one more servlet here itself. Let us call the same name context 2. Use servlet. Just say the class name as context servlet 2. Finish. Now here, now let us see how we can actually call it from here. Now you have a question that, anyways, how to access from context servlet 2 is the same thing again. You can just copy this up and paste it here. Right? Because I'll be doing the same way. Because this context servlet 2 again I'll be using context, which is get servlet context, right? And this will give us a global servlet context which we have. And from servlet context I'm getting parameter of some instance, the same name as such we have given. Right? I'm taking it to DB and then we have printed it up. Now let us say this is second servlet DB name something, so that we can actually differentiate between whether this is first or second. Now we want to create a link between this servlet and this servlet. That is something which we have. So we can create this in 3 different ways, if you remember, right? So either you can go for request dispatcher or send redirect, or you have here use logic. Let us use a logic here, right? Because these two are straightforward, right? Let us see how we can use any logic. Now this logic, whenever we are discussing about logic, right? It is nothing but a simple HTML you are going to write, right, in your print writer, right, in your print writers, and keeping the context type as text and HTML, so that your browser will know what actually you are doing. That is what I was talking about logic, right? Now let's go back to servlet 1, and here my DB instance, so we'll be using the same out because we have to write an HTML code here. Now let us say I have print. Let us break it up. And now I'll be using the anchor element A, where I'll give a href is equal to the servlet name. Right? I hope you guys know this anchor tag. And if you don't know, once you start this HTML, you'll be understanding. Anchor element is something which is used to give you the provision to move from one resource to other resource, right, or one page to other page. You have seen so many links in your web pages, right? So many links, like maybe in some if you go to any media site, right? So if you click on any link, it will go to the download site. So those non-line links, I'll show you here, are called as an anchor tag sometimes, right? So this A, let us say, let me just say click here to go, something I'm doing, and they close the anchor tag, right? So I'm using this, my DB instance is this, and I'm taking this up. Okay, so let us say, let's say break. So BR is nothing but break. Break here is like whenever we complete the sentence, we enter here, right? Which means we are going to new line. So that this does the same thing. Huh? It just stops here, and whatever we write next to this, it will take it to next line. That's a break, right? So here we have written the provision to move from first servlet, right? This is my first servlet, and I gave the second servlet name here in my anchor link tag element, right? So when you click on this, it will go to Servlet 2, right? Let us check it out. Now let us here say, before typing it at the second line, let us say out dot print of anyways, we already have this, but let us see how it works. The break works. The main intention is this break, how this break works. Okay. Now let's go back and see what happens. Let me restart the server and let's go back to our page 1.html. Oh, you have go. So when you click on go again, so I have the same code which you have written here. Right? So when you click on it, you go to first servlet, you come to first servlet, we are reading the context param, right? Where we will be reading everything here, and then we are showing that detail what we have got, and then we are moving to second second servlet where we are reading the same servlet context again, right? And we are showing that same here. Let's go back here, yes, click on. Now you can see here, my DB instance is so and so. Now you can see it has created an anchor tag here, right? It says click here to go. Now if I put the mouse over here, right? Can you see here what is happening? Just see when I move the mouse to that point. Can you see now? Now it gives a complete URL of what resource it will take us when we click on this. So that is our anchor tag, HTML anchor tag. Whenever you move to any of your button or anywhere, right, it will give you the link where it is about to reach, right? So when I click on this, now you can see at second servlet, now you can see at second DB name is so and so. You will get the same detail even at the second servlet. Okay? So that's how you can actually maintain the context. Now you can see I'm not passing any values, anything, but I'm able to read the same thing over here. Okay? That is what happens. And yesterday we have seen something called whatever the init params, right, we created inside this serve const. Let me just differentiate this. Right, we have created some init params here. We also created some init params in some other servlet, right? So we were able to get using servlet config only the current servlet configs, but not the other one. But here it's global. That is what is the difference between a servlet config and servlet context. So this is very important to know, right? Which is servlet config and context. Right? Now, so this is something which you have seen to get only one detail of your, if you know the key, right? If you know the configuration name, parameter name, you can get the value. And let us say you have more than one configuration. Now first let us see how to define more than one context params here, right? Which is, this is one context param which you have, right? And then it is same as what we understood in our init param. If you want to define multiple parameters, right, you have to take your multiple init params in your servlet. In the same way here, if you want to get multiple context configurations, you have to get multiple context param tags, right? And then let us say you have your param name, right? So the key, let us give it as db something called some location, let's say location, and then let's go to param value and just say db location some, let us do some IP 198.2.2.0 something like it. Let's give this IP. Okay, so this location is only, but we can also say db server. Okay, you have a context param 1 and context param 2. Okay, you can take one more context so that you can read all the context params at a time. You have your param name. Now here context param name will give db server That is a user. Okay? There will be separate credentials for even the DB server, which will be different from your database user. Right? So let us give here as system. Okay? System is your DB server user, and we have got 3 different context variables. Let's go back here. Now what we want to see here is, I want to see all the details, right? So let's go back here, and so even for getting all the details, all the context parameter configurations, right? The same method we have, which is so let me just differentiate this. So here you will be taking something called LOBG context or get init parameter names. The same thing as we have seen yesterday, right? The same internal methods we have, right? But different usage. Now this will give us an enumeration of type strings. Let us take that as LOBG enum is equal to, we have all the names now. So this will get all the context configurations, right, into this enumeration string. Okay? And now, so it is how you have to read this cursor. So let us take a while loop here. Okay? So here you can see, oops, while you have LOBG enum dot, you have has more elements. So until this has got elements, we'll just take those elements. Let us say string lstr key is equal to so you have something called LOBG enum dot, you have something called next element. Next element will give you the next first, it will start from first and it will give you all the context parameters, names, whatever we have. So from names we can get the value. Let us get the value here. Lstr value is equal to LOBG enum dot, you have something called get init, you have to get it from context dot getting param of your key. These are, you're getting all the details here and all the details over here. Now here let us take again the same out dot print. Let us print it up as out dot print of, let us say a break here, and just say name, yes, lstr key is a name, and you have something called a value. It's a value. What is it? We get the name and a value, right? And we have got a break. Now after this, let us take 2 breaks so that there will be some space between those things, or some 3 breaks. And the same way, let us copy this breaks and place it here so that we can see the link difference much better, right? So now we are getting all the context params whatever we have defined in my first servlet. We are moving to the second servlet. First let us see whether we are able to get all the parameters in my first servlet, right? Now this is how we have designed. Now let me just go back to the page 1. Now when I click on go, now you can see, now if you just notice something, I haven't restarted my server, right? Why? Because whatever you change, right, when you save this timecode, you will take care of everything. I just used to restart my server just to keep in sync that, okay, my page should work correct. But yes, it is not something you have to do every time, because sometimes when you change configurations, change that. Now you can see all the things DB server, user and DB instance, everything we got over here, which is your first servlet, right? Servlet context one. And now when I click on where to go, as of now we have only one thing, which is we have just read something called DB instance. Let's go back here again and see whether we are able to read all the parameters. Let me just copy this part, because this part will be same. Let's go to context 2 here, and then here again the same thing, the name and value. Now let's give some break over here. Choose your break here. Yeah, perfect. Now you have given some breaks and all, and you're actually printing all the details of your current context parameters. Let's go back to page 1. So now click on go. So this is your first servlet where you can see everything, and click here to go here, and you can see everything in your second servlet. Right? So that is how you actually give the details in your parameter stuffs. Right? And these contexts will work across. Now remember guys, we are not changing anything in our servlet. We just use those keys and get the values. But if you want to change anything, you just have to change it in configuration file. That's it. If you change your details here, right? So you don't have to deploy. You don't have to redeploy all the things. You just have to go and change this config, because this is a raw file, and raw file doesn't need compilation to get a byte data, right? It's a direct file. That's why you should always keep key and values as minimum as possible, right? Because this is something where the complete string will be transferred to your transferred in between your network. So don't keep heavy data like bigger paragraphs or something. Right? You just have to go for some simple key and value stuff in our web products. That's it. Right? Now this is one thing, and the next thing is, as I said, you can actually connect. We have seen something called connecting between one server to other server using the anchor, right? You can also use the same anchor. Let me create this anchor here directly, and here instead of servlet context, give some page. Let me give page1.html. From there we are actually running all this thing. Right? Click here to go to home, let us say. Right? Go home. Right? Now this is something which we have written in Servlet 2. Now which means we are intending to go back to the page 1, right? Once we are done with both the servlets. That is what we are intending. So let's go back to the page 1. Now when I click on here, it will go to my first servlet. Click here, it will go to second. Now you can see there is one more anchor here. Now you can see at this part, right, my mouse pointer. Now you can see here it says it will go to page1.html. So when I click on this, now you can see it will go. Now this is how you can use something called logic. Or anyways, you can also use your servlet like request dispatcher or send reader. But this is something which is some logic you are writing in your servlet to move on between your thing. Now this will be same even in JSPs, right? This is not something which is different, because JSPs it's like JSP is built over servlet. That's it. Whatever is you can see in servlet, everything will work in will just will be again repeated again in JSPs. Right? That is what again repeated in the sense not in the context of servlet, but in the context of JSPs. Yeah, that is how it works. Fine. So this is your something called servlet context which we have. Now I hope you guys know the difference between servlet config. So here we use something called init param. You just have to keep this in mind, right? Which comes under your servlet tab, right? Servlet tab, and here it comes under the home, which is web app, root, which is web app is something which is a root folder, and under this you'll get something called context param. So this is something which is very important, right? So this is something which is specific to Servlet, right? And this is something which is like a global to application level, global to app level, right? Where you can actually access this from any Servlet view. That's a big difference between your Servlet configs and Servlet context, right? Now, so if so till this part, you guys have any doubts over here? Totally? Right? Okay, fine. So if not, let's move on. So we'll see more, more things which we can use in Servlet context or in other things. So now let's move on to something called attributes. Now this is again a very important topic, which is attribute or attributes in Servlet. Right. Now, not attributes, we will be talking about something called attribute interface in Servlet. What exactly does this attribute does, right? So again, this is something which is an object. Attribute is again an object created, right? So which is used to set some, which is used to not only set, we can say set, get, or remove some information, right, which you can actually pass from one servlet to other servlet, or one servlet to other JSP, or one JSP to other servlet, right? So we will be using something called attribute, right? So this attribute methods we will be getting in many contexts. So we will get this in our Servlet context. We have in Servlet context class, and you will be getting this in your HTTP session, right? Also in Servlet request. Now, why do you have these, these many divisions is like, so whenever you are actually designing any attribute in Servlet context, which means you are designing in your application level, which means once you set any value in your application, this is same as you are actually setting your application level like cache parameters or session parameters, right? So this was a question which Swati was asking: how can I set something, some value which I can use across the whole application? Now this is a topic which is used to persist data across the complete application or in different things, right? And this HTTP session is something which creates attributes across a session scope. I can say scope here, application scope, and I can say session scope. Now, what is the difference between applications and session scope? So application scope is something which will, once you set any attribute, right? So these attributes will stay until your application is completely closed, or until your application is completely brought down, right? These attributes will stay. Session scope is something. So when we actually move to session management, I'll explain you much better. But here, each and every session, the session is something that, like you would have seen in some banking or trading or some secure websites, right? If you log into that site and if you keep the page ID for at least 10-20 minutes or something, right? So your page will say session expired, right? So that is called as your something where your session will be collapsed after some time. Because why it is happening? Because whenever you log into any website, right, and you are doing some transactions, right, like some things whatever has to be remembered will be remembered at your session, right? And after some time, if you keep that idle, so it is very important that your session will be completely clean. Like whatever attributes you have set, everything will be clear. That is something which we say remove, right? It will be removed, and what happens? It will take you to the login page. That's where you have to again log in something. So for that we call that expiry as timeout, session timeout, right? So the IT term which we use is session timeout, where you are creating a session, and obviously each and every web container, right, or page or any language will provide some default timeout, right? In Java, it is around 15 minutes to 20 or 25. In between these three, your session will expire, right? And again, it will take you to the page whatever you actually wanted to redirect to. That is something which is session scope. And then you have servlet request. This is something which is a request scope, right? So request scope is nothing but it can take from one servlet to other servlet. So if you are using request dispatcher in between 4 different servlets, which means you are actually using the same request across all the 4, right? Then this will be maintained. That is the difference between the request scope and all others, right? So these are different scopes which we have, which is application scope, you have session scope, and you have request scope, the main important things, right? So for application scope, we will be using something called servlet context to set some attributes. I'll show you how to set, not to worry. And then you have session, which is HTTP session, and you have request, which is servlet request, right? So those are your attributes in Servlet. So these are complete set of scopes which you have in order to work with your attributes. And then there are some internal methods of attribute, as I said. So there is something called set attribute, right, which is used to set the attributes. Now this is common for all, right? There is common function for all the common method, internal method for all the context we have. HTTP context, whatever you take any object, this will be same. You have set attribute where you can actually give a name and the object, or I can say the value, right? So this key will be maintained across the scope whatever you have mentioned. And then you have something called get attribute. Okay? Get attribute is something to get the value of that name, right? You can set here at servlet 1 maybe, right? And you can go back to the next servlet where you can actually get the item. Right? There is something how to get and set, right? And then you have something called remove attribute. Or remove attribute. Or sometimes you have something called remove all to. Remove all. We'll see this part, but basically you have got these things. Remove attribute, or you have to give some name where what happens is from the scope, whatever you are mentioning, it will remove this key. That is what is removed. So these are the 3 methods, internal methods we have to actually maintain the data across the resources. Right. Now this works across these things based on the scope you're actually looking on. Right. Now let's go back and see how actually we can do that. Now let me just close all. Let me take a fresh. So we'll first see the servlet context one, because we are in this phase. So we'll see how we can actually maintain the persistence using the servlet context, right? We'll create some servlets. Let us say it's servlet. Let us call it as attrib serv1, right? And finish. Create one more servlet, which is attrib servlet 2 maybe. Finish. Let's create one more servlet here. Right? Attrib servlet 3. Right? Finish this up. Right? So we have now 3 different servlets. Now let's create one different HTML page. Right. Or we can also use a page one, not worry, because page one we are using it as a calling page. Right? That's fine. We can use a page one, and let's give the servlet 1 over here. So this is something which we are actually doing. So it is not mandatory that you have to use a page. You can also create a servlet and create some print writer code to move from this servlet to that servlet. You can do that. Right? for our convenience, we are actually taking a page, right? So that you can also understand the page tag where you're actually going to that, right? So that's what it is. Now here in my first servlet, what I'll do here is I want to set some values here. Now here we are not even considering something called our configuration file, right? So whenever we talk about attributes, right, these attributes are not related, or we're not talking about something called configuration. Configuration things are done, right, which we are done. Now again, if you're creating more servlets, you can see all the servlet attributes. So 1, 2, 3, everything will be created as such. But this is something we will be using for URL mapping, URL pattern mapping, right? Now here we will see something which is completely into your cache, right? Now here, so first let us say, let's create a servlet context, right? Because we are using servlet context first. Now whenever you are using servlet context, just keep in mind you are actually using, we are going to define something or retrieve something which is in your application scope, which will work across all the applications you have, right? Now in this servlet context, let me take it as cntx context something is equal to get servlet context, right? Now here we will use something called context dot, we have something called set attribute, right? The set attribute is something where you can set some values into the context, current context. Now let us call this attribute as can be anything. So let us take it as firm, something, firm name, right? And the key I want to give it as some, let us say this is something called oracle, some firm name, right? I'm just taking an example here, right? Now this is something where I've set something like session variable, right? Something which is not session, but some key which I can get from anywhere across my application. Instead of defining it in my web.xml, that context, I'm creating it dynamically. That is what is the main difference, right? Now this is something which I've set. Now let's go back to the next servlet and see how it works, right? Now let me create a print writer here. I have LOPJ, or let's say it's out is equal to, we have a response dot get. So try to use this type of code as many times as you can, because you'll get used to this. Dot something called write, right? Now, so what we say here is at first servlet, so break here, and then let's say here set attribute done, and then we'll create an anchor tag here. Take break here and just say I want to create an anchor tag with href is equal to, let's go to the second servlet, which is active serve 2. I want to go to second servlet and close the anchor element and just say click here to go S2, let's say servlet 2, right? I'm just giving a shortcut and just say out dot close. Assign to servlet, yeah. We're actually setting some attribute, right? And we're actually giving an option to go to the next servlet. Now this will take you to the second servlet here, right? So here, now here you may get one doubt. Now whenever I give servlet, right, can't I give method here? No, you cannot use anchor to give some method here. So that's what, if you don't give anything, it will automatically go to get. That's why I'm writing everything in integer. Right? Now here again what we'll do, now you have to create a servlet context again here. LOPJ context, let us say, because we want to get the attribute which we have set in our previous, right? So let us say string, let us say LSTR from, right? And you have something called servlet context of get attribute, right? You can see here get attribute of some key. Now you can mention your key here. Now this key should be same, guys, right? Now this always returns an object type, right? But we're actually catching it now. Now let us handle some exception here, because this is very important, because every time you may not be using the same key you're using, right? Always try to use the same key, right? So here the key we have used is from, right? Just copy that up and paste it here. I'll show you what happens if you don't give this. We'll change it up and we'll see. That is a true string. It will give you converted to true string. But if there is nothing, and if you're doing true string, what happens? It will directly throw you some exception, null pointer exception, right? Because there is nothing as such, some other key if you use. And with this we have got the value of from, and let us take let us slice this up and just say you have response. Okay, we forgot something here. We have to set the response first, right? Dot set content type. So unless you can set this, everything will go as a simple HTML. So simple text. But you have this, and you have to mention the same thing here. Response dot set content type here to something called text or to HTML. Right? And then we'll take a print writer. So where we'll take out is equal to, so we are going to get it from our response dot get writer. That's important here. Now, so we got this. Now we'll just say out dot. We have something called print. Just say at second servlet. Okay. And then a break here. Right, and then just say out dot print of some break and just say value retrieve. Right, value retrieve is something down. Let's share from. That is what you have written. Okay. And this second servlet where we are actually writing something which is from the tree. After this, now here what we want to go, now we are in second right? So here without setting or getting, we want to go to third servlet and we'll see how actually you can get. Now let me just copy the same anchor to here and just say I want to go to active servlet 3. And just say out dot close. Right. Now this will take us to the third servlet which we have. Now let me copy this code here because it will be same even in here because we are just trying to read something, right? Let's copy and paste here. And we don't need this anchor tag. Okay, you can take this and you can just say, so here let us say you want to go to S3 which is servlet 3. And here let us say click here to go home and mention something called page1.html. Right, a simple word. So at third servlet I can say I'm at third servlet and from value retrieve so and so, because this will be same. Right? We'll be getting a context and we'll be reading the attribute, right, mapping it out to the servlet we have, and we're giving option to move to the next page. Right? Now let's restart this because you have done enough coding here. Yeah. So we'll just go and run that part. So okay, we are again. So let me refresh this because we have restarted. Okay, let us restart the page session. Page when you have click. Now you can see in our first servlet we are at first servlet and we said set attribute done. Right. Now click here to put as true. And when I click on this, we can see our second servlet and the from value retrieves are. And when I click on S3, again you can see we are third servlet and from value retrieves are. That is what it is. That is how you can actually set something and get something. Right? Now here, let us do one thing. Let us set something in our servlet 3. Right? And then we will see whether we can actually get it back to some other servlet, which is servlet 4. Right? So let me click on go home again. So this will route back again, right? Which is servlet 1. It will get the oracle again. Whenever I just go to first servlet, which means it is again rewriting the it will again rewrite something which is my attribute value here. That is what happens. So let me just say something called date. Let me say something called date toast, so that we can actually see whether it is changing or not. Oops. Okay, it already have changed. Let's go back to the page one. Click on go. Okay, so now in our surface alert something has set. Okay, now you can see oracle and some date. Okay, let me give some space here. Right? We are setting this item. Let's go back to page one. Okay. Okay, so at first alert something has set. Click on S2. Now you can see oracle. Now you can see it has set as some 656, some 20 seconds IST. Right? And I click on this, so the same data will be persisted even servlet 3. Now click on go home and set it again. Now at this point it has set again. And I go back, now you can see there is a change, 37. Right? So every time you set, right, every time you use this set, which means either it will create a new one. If this key is already there, it will try to rewrite this. That is what happens. Right? So that is how you can actually see there is a difference in time. Right? And if you go to third servlet, but from second and third servlet, wherever you are reading, right, reading will be same. It has to persist the data whatever you have set. That's the main thing. Now when you go home, now click on go, and now it will set again. Click on go. Now you can see there is some difference. Right? So it is in servlet 2, the same data. Now click on this, again you can see the same data. That is what is a persistent of data, which you can keep across everything. Now we are seeing something which is in our servlet, right? This is something which is same even in our JSP, right? So we'll see the same thing even in JSP, right? But only thing is we'll be reading in some other way. What is that way? It will be very interesting. We'll see when we come to our JSPs, right? So that is what is your attribute based on your servlet context. Now we'll see, we will have more things here. We have seen something called set attribute, get attributes. You also have something called get, what is that? Init again, init parameter names. Now what do we have? Let us say we have set so many attributes, right? There are some 5 different attributes. You want to read all the attributes at once. So we will be using again something called init parameters, which will give the complete all context parameters including our attributes. Right? We'll see this part tomorrow. Right? We can also do that. Right? So tomorrow what we'll do? We'll create one more servlet. Right? Right? In our third servlet we'll create one more context. We'll just set that, and we'll go to the fourth servlet, read the both, create 3 more, and we'll create one more servlet, fifth servlet, where you can actually read all the context parameters and all the keys whatever we have set across complete 4 servlets, right? So we'll touch upon that tomorrow. Fine. So you guys have any doubts till this part of servlets, complete servlets, or anything? Okay, fine then. So I will take it as yes. You don't have, right? You can just ask me anytime you want. Right? Let's run it up here, and we shall meet tomorrow. Fine.
Let's do that.